The embassy compound in Basra pulsed with a raw, nervous energy. Inside the cramped command tent, the air was fouled with diesel, sweat, and a metallic tang of fear. Radios spat broken static. Voices overlapped, orders snapped, and maps lay spread across folding tables, every eye flicking to the bleak face of a clock. Captain Emily Hayes wasn't the obvious answer everyone wanted. Just another transport pilot waiting for a green light. Then, when a hush fell that felt like the last breath before a storm, she spoke 6 words that stopped the tent cold. "Let me fly them out." Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to Military and Veteran Stories so you never miss these true tales of courage. And tell us in the comments where you're watching from today. At 33, Emily carried herself like someone who had learned prudence early. A slim, lean frame honed for endurance more than showmanship. Hazel eyes that weighed people before she passed judgment, and a pale scar that ran near her temple, a souvenir from a hard landing years earlier. A half-hidden tattoo graced her left wrist beneath a glove most days, a pair of wings above a small anchor. She wore her past close and quiet. People rarely asked, and she had no reason to volunteer. She hailed from Portsmouth, Virginia. Her father hauled home the smell of steel and sea every night from the shipyard, hands rough and stained from long days at the dock. Her mother juggled lesson plans and supper, determined to give Emily a steadiness she imagined her daughter might need. Practical, reserved, persistent, Emily learned to finish what she started, and to do it without fanfare. That steady insistence on following through would shape the rest of her life. Emily joined as a mechanic at first. She crawled into landing gear bays, wiped grease from fingernails that never quite came clean, and spent years learning the language of machines. Which sound meant imminent failure, which vibration was benign. She was the one still at the hangar bench long after others left for the mess. Eventually, the itch to feel the aircraft itself, not just mend it, pulled her toward flight school. She didn't go because anyone pushed her. She went because she couldn't stand being only the hands that fixed engines. She wanted to feel the thrust and the lift and the responsibility of flight. Flight school chewed through bravado and polished ego. Emily's quiet made her an easy mark among the loud candidates, but when it came to exams, to stingy night sorties, and to maneuvers that separated the casual from the competent, she never lost her head. Calm under pressure became her hallmark. The instructors noticed, not always publicly, but in their reports and in the quiet nods. When her wings were pinned on, her path settled into transport, hauling supplies, fuel, and people, missions that rarely made headlines but kept the machinery of war moving. Her logbook filled with long, thankless sorties, dusty runways, tight landings, flights where no one waited with beers to celebrate. Reliable, invisible, a workhorse. Nicknames came and stuck. Raven followed her, a call sign earned during a deployment when she guided aircraft through inky corridors at night, indistinguishable from the darkness. The wider officer corps called her the Cargo Queen, not a compliment so much as a pigeonhole. Her personnel file reinforced the image, efficient, steady, unremarkable on paper. She had no medals that shimmered, no loud baroom tales. It was easy for an audience of men chasing headline missions to underestimate someone quiet, someone who didn't tug on the sleeve of opportunity. But Emily carried a shadow most in Basra did not know. Years earlier, she'd been attached to a rescue that failed, an aborted hostage extraction in Kandahar that ended with a cockpit empty and a friend never returning. She had not been the pilot that night. The guilt of that absence took up residence inside her. It shaped the quiet vow she kept. If a chance ever reappeared to stop loss, she would not stand aside. That promise sat under her ribs like a second heart, steady and insistent. So when the Basra crisis erupted and commanders argued late into the night over plans that verged on improvisation, Emily's choice sprang from more than bravado or ambition. It came from a place that had nothing to do with recognition, an old debt, a memory of a life lost while she watched. In the tent, the arguments grew louder. Foot soldiers wanted a ground breach. The SEALs insisted it was all they could do. Others pushed for the slow calculus of negotiation. Each option carried a price in blood. Dawn, with its promised executions, approached like a blade. Emily watched the maps with a pilot's eye, tracing alleys, rooftops, and ruined concrete the rest of the staff either missed or dismissed. There was a narrow stretch by the river, half buried beneath rubble, yet long and firm enough for rotors to settle if someone was bold and precise. To most eyes, it was invisible. To someone who had flown dust-strip landings and squeezed birds between buildings, it was a lifeline. She suggested an aerial extraction. Expectations met her with derision. A captain snorted, a colonel dismissed her gently but firmly. "Stick to supply runs, Raven," he said, the sentence designed to tether her back into the corner he'd assigned. A few pilots chuckled. The SEALs offered no defense. Emily felt the sting of every glance designed to remind her of the space she was supposed to occupy. For a breath, she nearly yielded. Then she thought of the Kandahar night of Jordan Price, and the echo of his words shoved through her memory. "If no one else steps up, you do." She kept returning to the same lines on the map. If they inserted assault teams onto rooftops and opened corridors through the upper floors, she could touch down on that hidden strip and be loading hostages minutes later. It was risky, but not impossible. It was math, not myth. When she voiced the calculated approach again, the tent met her with the same derisive silence. The colonel moved to officially reject her. "You are dismissed," he said, and motioned for another captain. But Emily did not walk away. She'd carried a folded old map inside her jacket, pencil-scratched routes, extraction corridors labeled in cramped handwriting that came from practical flights, not classroom theory. She had the odd phrase in Pashto on her tongue from nights in the field where listening paid off. When the radio operator hesitated over a thread of intercepted dialects, she bent in and spoke 3 quiet Pashto words. The operator stared. Not everyone expected a cargo pilot to have picked up that language. Another small piece of the puzzle shifted in the minds of those who noticed. Hours crawled. Conversations circled like vultures. Then, close to dawn, the terrorists' broadcast cut through static. Executions would begin at daybreak and continue one every 10 minutes until demands were met. The words landed like poison. The SEALs squared their shoulders. The room's center of gravity shifted to a desperate urgency. Panic could have consumed anyone, but Emily remained composed. It was not indifference. It was a tool she had learned to use. Panic killed faster than bullets. She let that harness her decisions. Violence cracked the night open at around 200. Small arms fire rattled the northern perimeter. Soldiers scrambled. A man went down in the open. A clear human crisis amid military chaos. Emily was nearby, helmet in hand when the shot rang out. She didn't wait for orders. She crossed open ground on a run, dropped to her knees beside the wounded soldier, and moved like someone with more than basic first aid training. Her hands worked with practiced speed, improvised tourniquet, pressure, calm commands. The wounded man's screams smoothed into gasps. His blood flow slowed. Around them, combat continued, but that single act settled a few questions in the compound. Cargo pilots didn't typically dress wounds in the dark. It revealed something in Emily that didn't match her personnel file, experience beyond the routine. Back in the tent, a tactical briefing unfolded. Wind vectors and rooftop clearances got tossed around like dice. A young flight officer penciled in an approach. Emily stepped forward, corrected the crosswind estimate by a few degrees, and drew the safer line. When the proposed math was recalculated, her correction was right. A mistake of that size over rubble-strewn neighborhoods could send a helicopter into a building. For the first time that night, the murmurs ran in a new direction. Not ridicule, but attention. The SEAL commander's expression softened just a notch. Recognition, possibly. He didn't profess to know her, but something in his bearing shifted. Word of the medevac and the corrected approach moved faster than the official channels could track. By dawn, the atmosphere around the compound had shifted. The previous mockery cooled into a cautious awareness. Emily didn't seek it. She ate in silence and walked through the mess line like someone used to being overlooked. But the seed of a different respect had been planted. When the SEAL commander strode into the tent, dust clinging to his gear and a sleep-heavy set to his jaw, the argument died. He scanned faces, read maps, then fixed on the murmured nickname. "Raven?" he asked, the syllable a test. The name landed, and something like a memory surfaced. He stepped up and studied Emily, as if she'd just stepped out of a photograph he'd once seen. Then he said what no one in that tent expected, loud enough for everyone to hear. He had been there the night she'd flown under fire and gotten men out of Kandahar, when others said extraction was impossible. That admission changed the tenor of the room. The colonel's color drained. The young captain's smirks evaporated. Veterans who knew what a risky night sortie meant straightened with a recognition that comes from shared survival. She had done things that never made it into glowing personnel summaries. If she now said the rooftops were the way out, then they would trust her. With the new authority tacitly granted, engines roared to life as the plan went from paper to motion. Emily took point, helmet snapped down, voice cool and precise on the net. Her formation cut low between buildings, wingtips whispering past brick, rotors churning up dust like ghosts marking their path. They moved tight, disciplined, eyes ahead for snipers and traps. As the helicopters neared the school compound, ropes unfurled and assault teams slid fast onto roofs. Breachers forced panels and doors. Gunfire folded into the building's interior as teams pushed down to the gym. Emily's hive awareness guided the formation. Land in the courtyard, stagger lifts if a bird gets hit, keep the approach shallow and fast. Then the barrage began in earnest. RPGs streaked from the school's facade. One arced into the flight path of a support bird, clipping the tail and forcing a violent wobble. Emily saw the flare of smoke in the corner of her eye and dove her own machine under the crippled bird to take the blast and steady the damaged helicopter with a wash of downward wind. Alarms screamed, panels shuddered under puncture. Through it all, she did not betray panic. Her voice remained an anchor. On the ground, SEALs hustled terrified civilians into waiting gunships. Children sobbed, hands tied, eyes shell-shocked. Emily's crew chiefs loaded and braced, counting and stacking bodies, securing seatbelts as if they were placing fragile items into jewelry boxes. "Load fast. 90 seconds to wheels up," she intoned, and the tempo in the courtyard shifted into mechanical, efficient motion. Bullets ricocheted. An RPG slammed into a near wall, sending a spray of masonry across the windshield, but they continued. One by one, the birds lifted out on the precise escape vectors Emily had drawn in her head, each laden with a handful of survivors. When the last human was accounted for and the final helicopter climbed away, the formation turned back toward the embassy. The return flight felt strangely unreal. Battered helicopters cutting through dawn light, passengers crying and breathing and alive. Wheels kissed down on the tarmac with a thump that echoed like a release. For a moment, everything went still. Then medics rushed, stretchers rolled, and soldiers moved to help civilians disembark. The faces of the rescued, some wet with tears, others staring blankly at freedom, told the unremarked story of what had nearly been lost. Around her, people who had doubted now opened their mouths and found no snappy retort. The SEAL commander, who had once been a stranger in tactical argument, stepped forward and saluted her as men around him followed. Respect cascaded like a wave. Emily responded with a measured salute and nothing more. She didn't look for accolades. When asked how they had achieved what many deemed impossible, Emily shrugged and pointed to a dozen different people. The SEALs who fought into the building, the crew chiefs who hauled civilians aboard, the gunners who kept the skies clear, the flight teams who flew their lines. "Teamwork," she said simply. She left out the flashier details, the moment she shielded a crippled bird with her own, not from false modesty but because she had never needed to build a monument to herself. Saving lives was its own reward. Later, on the fringe of the compound as floodlights cooled the dust, Emily sat alone on an empty ammo crate. Her gloves were off. Her helmet rested beside her. She rubbed the faded wings and anchor tattoo on her wrist and thought of Jordan, the friend she had not been able to bring back years ago. The ink was worn, the edges soft, but its meaning remained as sharp as ever. She whispered a private vow to the dark, a quiet promise that was both closure and continuation. If others could not step up, she would. The lesson she left that night wasn't loud. It didn't live in the salute or the clapping. It lived in the way a single, underestimated person moved when everything else seemed stuck. Courage rarely demands attention. Often it waits in the corners where people don't expect it and then reaches forward, steady and precise, when it counts most. We pass people every day who carry unseen scars, faded patches in lockers, languages learned in whispers, tattoos hidden beneath gloves. Their stories aren't always sung aloud, but their resolve is there, ready when needed. Sometimes a hero is the one who speaks or acts only when it matters.